They say that love makes you blind, but I never expected it to leave me completely ruined. Looking back, I can see all the little signs I chose to ignore. The late-night phone calls he would take in the other room. The way he suddenly started locking his screen. The coldness in his eyes when he looked at me. But when you are deeply in love with someone, your brain finds 1,000 excuses for their behavior. You tell yourself they are just stressed at work. You tell yourself that you are being paranoid. You give them your heart, your trust, and in my case, every single dollar I had ever earned. My name is Maya, and for 5 years, I thought I was building a life with the man of my dreams. His name was Julian. He was charming, ambitious, and had a way of making everyone in a room feel like they were the most important person in the world. When we first met, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He was a rising star at a boutique investment firm, or at least that is what he told me. I was a graphic designer, running my own small studio. I worked long, exhausting hours, but I didn't care because I was doing it for our future. We had a beautiful apartment, we talked about marriage, and we talked about building an empire together. Julian always had big dreams. He didn't just want a normal life. He wanted wealth, status, and luxury. And I believed in him. I believed in him so much that when he came to me one evening with tears in his eyes, telling me his business was on the verge of collapse because of a bad partnership, I didn't hesitate. I emptied my savings account. I signed over the money I had set aside to buy my own office space. Over the course of 2 years, I gave Julian over $150,000. He held me tight that night, whispering into my hair that I was his savior. He promised that as soon as the company turned a profit, he would pay me back every single penny with interest. He told me that my sacrifice would make our future family secure forever. I believed him because why would the man who promised to love me forever lie to me? But the truth has a funny way of coming out, usually when you least expect it, and usually in the most painful way possible. It started with a notification on an old iPad. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. Julian had told me he had to work late to close a major deal with a new client. I was sitting on the couch, working on a design project, when his old iPad, the one synced to his personal accounts that he had left on the coffee table, buzzed. I usually never looked at his devices. We had an unwritten rule of trust. But the notification stayed on the screen, and a name caught my eye, Chloe. The message read, "The suite is booked for this weekend, darling. I can't wait until you finally leave her so we can be together openly." My heart didn't just skip a beat. It felt like it stopped entirely. The blood rushed to my ears, creating a deafening roar. I picked up the iPad with trembling hands. My fingers were shaking so violently I could barely type in his passcode, which was still our anniversary date. When the screen unlocked, a world of deceit opened up before my eyes. There were hundreds of text messages, photos, and flight reservations. It wasn't just a casual mistake. Julian had been living a completely double life for over a year. And the most sickening part? The weekend trips, the expensive dinners, the designer bags he bought for Chloe, they were all funded by the money I had loaned him. The money I had worked 14 hours a day to earn. He wasn't saving his business. He was using my sweat and tears to finance a life with another woman. I sat there in the dark apartment for hours, the cold glow of the screen illuminating my face. The pain was so intense it felt physical, like a heavy weight crushing my chest. I wanted to scream, to break things, to pack his bags and throw them out the window. But as the initial shock began to fade, a strange, icy calm washed over me. Anger is a hot fire that burns out quickly. But betrayal? Betrayal is a cold stone that hardens your resolve. I realized that if I confronted him right then, he would spin a web of lies. He would apologize, beg, or worse, find a way to legally protect himself and keep my money. I didn't just want an apology. I wanted justice. I wanted him to lose everything the exact same way he had stolen everything from me. And as I stared at the messages on that screen, I noticed a file folder synced to his cloud drive. A folder marked with a title that made my breath hitch. Private transactions. Little did Julian know, his greed had left behind a digital trail. A trail that was about to lead to his total downfall. When Julian came home that night around 1 a.m., I was sitting in the kitchen with a mug of tea, pretending everything was perfectly normal. I had put the iPad back exactly where it belonged. I had wiped the tears from my face and practiced my expression in the bathroom mirror until I looked completely calm. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. "Hey, babe," he said, walking into the kitchen. He looked tired, but he had that smooth, effortless smile on his face. He walked over and kissed the top of my head. A kiss that used to bring me comfort now made my stomach turn with absolute disgust. "Still up? You shouldn't wait up for me. I told you it was going to be a brutal night at the office." "How did the meeting go?" I asked, keeping my voice soft and steady. "Great. Really great." He lied without a single blink. "The client is ready to sign. We just need to finalize some paperwork. It's going to turn everything around for us, Maya. I promise you, all this hard work is about to pay off." I looked into his eyes, searching for even a flicker of guilt, a hint of shame. There was nothing. He was a professional actor, and I had been his biggest fan. It was terrifying to realize that the person you share a bed with, the person you think you know better than anyone else, is a complete stranger. "That's wonderful, Julian," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm so proud of you." Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a lie to uncover the truth. I became an investigator in my own home. Every time Julian went to sleep or took a shower, I was on his devices, gathering evidence. I didn't just want proof of his cheating. I wanted to know where my money went. What I discovered was far more sinister than a simple affair. Julian wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. The folder on his drive, Private Transactions, contained records of his investment firm's accounts. But they weren't normal business transactions. Julian had been skimming money from his elderly clients, moving funds into offshore accounts, and using his company's internal system to cover his tracks. He was running a miniature Ponzi scheme within his own firm. And my money, the $150,000 I gave him, wasn't used to save his business. He had used it to pay back an investor who had threatened to go to the police a year ago. I hadn't saved his business. I had funded his cover-up. As I dug deeper, I found out who Chloe was. She wasn't just some random woman he met at a bar. She was the daughter of the managing partner at his firm. Julian wasn't just having an affair with her for fun. He was using her to secure a promotion to senior partner. He was planning to marry her, climb the corporate ladder, and leave me behind with nothing but a mountain of debt and a broken heart. One evening, while Julian was out at another business dinner, I found a digital copy of a prenuptial agreement he had already drafted with a lawyer. He was planning to break up with me the following month, right after his promotion was finalized. The document listed his assets, including a luxury condo he had secretly purchased using the stolen funds, a condo he shared with Chloe. My name was nowhere in his life. I was just a stepping stone, a temporary bank account he used until he could latch onto someone wealthier. I sat at my desk, looking at the spreadsheet of his crimes and his betrayals. I felt a deep, profound sadness for the girl I used to be, the girl who trusted him blindly. But that girl was gone now. In her place was someone who understood exactly how the world worked. Julian thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he could use people, discard them, and walk away into a sunset of luxury. He forgot one simple rule of life: what goes around, comes around. And I was going to make sure it came around with the force of a hurricane. To destroy a man like Julian, you cannot just throw a tantrum. If I had simply confronted him, he would have denied everything, deleted the files, moved his stolen money, and used his powerful connections to paint me as a crazy, bitter ex-girlfriend. In the corporate world, reputation is everything. To take him down, I had to be patient, meticulous, and completely invisible until the trap was set. I began by copying every single file, email, bank statement, and text message onto an encrypted external hard drive. I made 3 separate copies. One I kept with me, one I hid in a safety deposit box at a bank Julian didn't know about, and one I sent to a trusted friend who lived out of state, with strict instructions to open it only if something happened to me. Next, I needed legal advice. I couldn't just go to the police without understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. I scheduled a meeting with a high-profile forensic accountant and a top-tier corporate lawyer. I met them in a quiet office across town, using a fake name for the booking to ensure no one would connect it back to Julian. When the lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor, looked over the documents I brought, her eyebrows raised in shock. "Your boyfriend is incredibly reckless," Eleanor said, flipping through the bank transfers. "He has been stealing from pension funds and moving the money through shell corporations. He thinks he's clever because he's hiding it behind legitimate business expenses, but any serious audit will tear this apart in hours. The problem for you, Maya, is that your money was transferred as a personal loan without a formal contract. On paper, it looks like a gift." "A gift?" I asked, my heart sinking. "But he promised to pay me back. I have text messages of him saying it's a loan." "Text messages help," Eleanor replied, leaning forward. "But in a criminal court, that money might get swallowed up by his bankruptcy or seized by the government as part of his illegal gains. If you want your money back, and if you want him to pay for what he did, we have to play this very smartly. We need him to formally acknowledge the debt in a legally binding way before his world collapses." "How do we do that?" I asked. "You have to make him sign a promissory note," Eleanor explained. "A document that states he owes you exactly $150,000, with a strict repayment schedule, guaranteed by his personal assets, like that secret condo he bought. If he defaults, the condo becomes yours automatically. But you have to get him to sign it without realizing that you know about his fraud or his affair." I walked out of the lawyer's office that day feeling a heavy weight on my shoulders. How was I going to get a pathological liar and a master manipulator to sign a document that would strip him of his prized possession? I had to give him an incentive. I had to use his own greed against him. I spent the next 3 days creating a trap. I knew Julian's firm was looking for a new graphic design agency to handle their massive rebranding project, a project worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. As the owner of my own studio, I was in a unique position. I decided to pitch for the project, but I didn't do it through normal channels. I sent a message to the managing partner, Chloe's father, presenting a brilliant, highly confidential marketing strategy that would save his firm millions. I didn't include my real name on the initial pitch. I used my agency's corporate entity name. The managing partner was instantly impressed and requested an urgent meeting. This was my opening. I told Julian that a massive corporate client had approached my agency, and they were about to sign a contract that would bring in $500,000 in revenue. When I told him this over dinner, I saw the greed spark in his eyes. He instantly started calculating how he could get his hands on that money. "Wow, Maya, that's incredible," he said, his voice dripping with sudden warmth. "A $500,000 contract? That changes everything for your studio. We could use that capital to invest in some real estate projects I've been looking at." "Actually, Julian," I said, putting on my best worried face, "my bank says that because of the large personal loans I gave you, my business cash flow looks unstable on paper. To secure the final approval for this corporate contract, the bank needs to see a formal repayment agreement for the money I loaned you. It's just a formality for their auditors. They need a signed promissory note showing that the $150,000 is a secured loan backed by an asset." Julian froze. His fork hovered in the air. For a second, I thought he suspected something. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I maintained a calm, innocent expression. "An asset?" he asked slowly. "What kind of asset?" "Oh, just any property or investment in your name," I said casually, taking a sip of water. "The lawyer said your share in your firm's investment portfolio or any real estate would work. If we don't get it signed by Friday, the bank will cancel the contract, and I'll lose the $500,000. And I really wanted to use that money to help buy our dream house next year." I had baited the hook perfectly. I mentioned the dream house to make him think I was still completely oblivious to his plans to leave me. And I mentioned the $500,000 to feed his insatiable hunger for money. Julian's mind went to work. He figured that since he was planning to leave me in a month anyway, he could just sign the paper, secure my business money, find a way to manipulate me out of it, and then vanish. He thought he was playing me. He had no idea he was stepping directly into a cage. The following evening, Julian came home with a bottle of expensive champagne. He looked victorious. "Babe, I talked to my legal guy at the office. he said, handing me a document. He drafted a standard promissory note like your bank wanted. It lists my personal investment account as security. We can sign it tonight, get it notarized tomorrow morning, and you can get that massive contract. I took the document and looked it over. Julian thought he was being clever. The investment account he listed was almost empty. He had already moved the funds out of it. If I had signed his version of the document, the security would have been worthless. He was trying to scam me one last time, but I was prepared. I smiled, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "Thank you so much, Julian. Let me just send this to my business accountant to make sure it matches the exact format the bank requested. I'll print out the final version for us to sign tomorrow." That night, while he slept peacefully, dreaming of his future luxury life with Chloe, I sent the document to Eleanor. She completely redrafted it. She removed his empty investment account and replaced it with the exact legal address and deed registration number of his secret luxury condo, the one he thought I knew nothing about. She also added a clause stating that in the event of any legal dispute or separation, the document would remain fully enforceable, and any attempt to liquidate the asset without my written consent would result in an immediate automatic transfer of the property title to me. The next morning, we met at a local cafe that had a public notary service. I brought the printed documents in a professional folder. Julian was in a rush, checking his watch every 2 minutes. He was meeting Chloe for lunch later that day, a detail I knew from tracking his calendar. "All right, let's get this done quickly," he said, flipping to the signature page. "I have a huge presentation at noon." "Of course," I said, handing him a pen. The accountant made a few standard adjustments to satisfy the bank's strict legal definitions, but it's all ready to go. Because he was arrogant, and because he believed I was completely under his control, Julian didn't read the fine print. He didn't check the asset description on page 3. He thought he was signing a useless piece of paper backed by an empty bank account. He signed his name with a flourish on all 3 copies. The notary stamped the documents, signed her name, and handed them back to me. "All done," I said, carefully placing the executed documents into my bag. "Great," Julian said, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. "Good luck with the big contract today, Maya. Let's celebrate tonight. I'll take you out to that French restaurant you love." "I can't wait," I replied. As I watched him walk out of the cafe, a wave of pure relief washed over me. The first part of my plan was complete. I now legally owned his secret sanctuary. But getting my money back was only half the battle. Julian hadn't just stolen from me. He had broken my spirit, lied to my face for years, and mocked my love. He deserved to experience the total collapse of his carefully constructed universe. I got into my car, opened my laptop, and sent the final pitch proposal to the managing partner of Julian's firm. But this time, I didn't send it from an anonymous account. I sent it from my personal corporate email, clearly showing my name, Maya Lin, founder of Lin Design Studio. And attached to that email wasn't just a marketing proposal. It was a secondary folder titled Julian's Internal Financial Audit and Personal Conduct Report. I clicked send. The countdown had begun. Julian had exactly 24 hours before his world exploded, and I had front row seats to the show. The annual charity gala for Julian's investment firm was held at a historic hotel downtown. It was the biggest event of the year for the city's financial elite. It was also the night Julian expected to be officially announced as the new senior partner of the firm. He had spent weeks preparing his speech, buying a custom tuxedo, and ensuring everything was flawless. He had told me weeks ago that spouses and partners weren't invited to this specific event, because it was a strict networking night for executives only. It was a lie, of course. He was bringing Chloe as his official date, introducing her to the board members to solidify his position as part of the family. I didn't argue when he told me that lie. I just nodded and told him to have a wonderful time. But on the night of the gala, I didn't stay home. I wore a stunning, emerald green silk dress that I had bought specifically for this occasion. I had my hair styled professionally, and I wore a deep red lipstick that made me look completely different from the tired, stressed woman who had been slaving away at her desk for years. I didn't need an invitation. I had received a personal entry pass directly from the managing partner's secretary the day before, right after he reviewed the files I sent him. When I arrived at the grand ballroom, the room was filled with hundreds of people in elegant attire. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd, jazz music played softly in the background, and waiters carrying trays of champagne moved seamlessly through the guests. I scanned the room and spotted Julian almost immediately. He was standing near the main stage, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with a group of older men in suits. Next to him was Chloe. She was wearing a diamond necklace, the very necklace I had found a receipt for on his iPad, bought with my savings. They looked like the perfect golden couple. Julian looked completely at ease, confident that he had won at life. I took a deep breath, grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and walked straight toward them. As I stepped into their circle, Julian's laugh suddenly cut off. His eyes widened in absolute horror. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he had seen a ghost. He choked on his drink, coughing slightly as he tried to regain his composure. "Maya," he whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? How did you get in?" Chloe looked at me, her eyes narrowing with confusion and annoyance. "Julian, who is this?" "I'm Maya," I said, stepping forward with a calm, radiant smile. I extended my hand to Chloe, Julian's fiancée. Well, his ex-fiancée to be precise. Chloe froze, her hand dropping to her side. She looked at Julian, her face turning red. "Julian, what is she talking about? You told me you broke up with her months ago. You told me she was just a crazy roommate who refused to move out of your apartment." The executives surrounding Julian stopped talking. The entire circle went dead silent. Everyone was staring at us. Julian was trembling, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Chloe, please let me explain," Julian stammered, reaching out for her arm. "She's unstable. She's trying to ruin my night. Maya, you need to leave right now before I call security." "Oh, you don't need to call security, Julian." A powerful voice boomed from behind us. The crowd parted, and Arthur Vance, the managing partner of the firm and Chloe's father, walked into the circle. His face was like a stone wall, devoid of any warmth. Behind him were two men in dark suits who didn't look like hotel security. They looked like corporate investigators. "Arthur," Julian said, his voice desperate, "I am so sorry about this disruption. This woman is completely out of her mind. I'll have her removed immediately so we can proceed with the announcement." Arthur Vance looked at Julian with an expression of pure disgust. "The only person being removed tonight, Julian, is you." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Julian looked like he had been struck by lightning. He looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, but every single board member and colleague turned their eyes away from him. "Arthur, what do you mean?" Julian whispered, his confidence completely shattered. "The senior partnership. My presentation." "There is no partnership, Julian," Arthur Vance said, his voice echoing clearly for everyone nearby to hear. "And your career in this city is officially over. Yesterday afternoon, I received a very interesting file. A file detailing exactly how you have been stealing from our firm's private accounts, falsifying financial records, and defrauding our clients. We have been running an internal audit for the last 12 hours, and every single allegation has been confirmed." Julian's knees visibly buckled. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound echoing through the quiet ballroom. "No, that's not true. It's a setup," Julian shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She made it up. She's bitter because I'm leaving her. You can't trust anything she says." "She didn't just send words, Julian," Arthur replied coldly. "She sent digital bank receipts, internal server logs from your personal computer, and transaction numbers. You used our firm's reputation to steal over $2 million from pension funds. And to make matters worse, you used my daughter to try and cover your tracks and secure a promotion to protect yourself from scrutiny." Chloe looked at Julian, tears of anger and humiliation streaming down her face. "You used me? You told me you loved me. You told me everything you did was for our future." "Chloe, no, I do love you. Julian pleaded, trying to grab her hand. She slapped him across the face. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. "Don't touch me. You are a disgusting, pathetic liar." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. Arthur Vance stepped closer to Julian, his eyes burning with fury. "The police have already been notified. They are waiting for you in the lobby. I suggest you walk out quietly before they come in here and drag you out in handcuffs in front of everyone." Julian looked at me. The arrogance was completely gone. The charm had vanished. He looked small, broken, and utterly defeated. "Why, Maya?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "Why would you do this to me? I loved you. We had a life together." "You didn't love me, Julian," I said, my voice calm, clear, and completely steady. "You loved my money. You loved using people. You thought you could destroy my life, steal my savings, and walk away into luxury without any consequences. You forgot that everything you build on a foundation of lies eventually collapses. I didn't destroy you. Your own greed did." The two corporate investigators stepped forward, grabbing Julian by his arms. He didn't fight them. He looked like a hollow shell as they led him out of the grand ballroom, through the crowd of people who were whispering and pointing at him. I stood there in my emerald dress, watching him disappear through the double doors. I didn't feel a surge of malicious joy. I didn't feel like celebrating. What I felt was a profound sense of peace. The weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks was finally gone. I had taken my power back. The weeks following the gala were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Because of the overwhelming evidence I provided, Julian's legal defense team collapsed within days. He realized that fighting the charges would only result in a maximum sentence, so he agreed to a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of corporate fraud, grand larceny, and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 8 years in a federal prison, with strict orders for full financial restitution to all his victims. But as my lawyer Eleanor had warned me, the government seized all of Julian's primary bank accounts and business assets to pay back the large institutional investors he had defrauded. If I had relied on the criminal courts to get my money back, I would have received nothing. This was where my final trap proved its brilliance. Because Julian had signed the promissory note backed specifically by his luxury condo, and because he had signed it before the official fraud charges were filed, the property was legally tied to a private civil debt. Eleanor filed an immediate motion for default, since Julian was now in prison and unable to make the required payments. The court ruled in my favor. The deed of the luxury condo was legally transferred directly into my name. It was valued at over $400,000. I sold the condo 3 weeks later. After paying off the remaining mortgage and my legal fees, I walked away with over $250,000 in cash. Not only did I get my original $150,000 back, but I also received an extra $100,000 for the emotional distress and years of unpaid labor I had contributed to his life. I used that money to finally buy the independent office space for my graphic design studio that I had always dreamed of. My business began to thrive. The managing partner, Arthur Vance, kept his word. He was so grateful that I had exposed Julian before he married into the family that he awarded my agency the full corporate rebranding contract. It was a massive success, establishing my studio as one of the top design firms in the region. A few days ago, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Julian. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read his apologies, his excuses, or his anger. I walked over to the paper shredder in my new office and dropped the envelope inside. I watched it turn into harmless confetti. As I sat at my desk, looking out the large windows at the bustling city below, I reflected on the journey I had been through. Betrayal is one of the most painful experiences a human being can endure. It breaks your perception of reality and makes you question your own worth. But it also reveals who you truly are. If you are going through a betrayal right now, if someone you loved and trusted has broken your heart and stolen your peace, listen to me closely. Do not let their actions turn you into a bitter person. Do not waste your energy on screaming, crying, or begging for answers they will never give you. Instead, take that pain and channel it into focus. Be smart. Be patient. Let your success and your justice be your ultimate response. The truth always finds its way to the light, and those who build their lives by tearing others down will always find themselves buried under the rubble of their own creation. Trust the process, protect yourself, and remember that the best revenge is living a life so beautiful that their memory becomes nothing more than a distant shadow.